The day I found out my wife was cheating. She was wearing the dress I bought her for our 10th anniversary. It was a midnight blue silk dress, the color of the ocean at dusk, and it clung to her body like a whispered promise. I remember the day I saw it in a boutique window, and I just knew I had to get it for Sarah. When she tried it on for the first time, her eyes lit up, and she twirled in our living room, her laughter filling the space like wind chimes. "I love it, Mark," she'd said, her voice warm and genuine. "It's perfect." Tonight she was wearing it again. She stood by the window overlooking our backyard, where our kids, 8-year-old Lily and 6-year-old Jake, were chasing fireflies in the humid July air. A soft smile played on her lips, and for a moment, everything was right with the world. She was my Sarah. We were Mark and Sarah, the golden couple who'd made it. The high school sweethearts who turned into a marriage our friends envied. We had the beautiful house in the suburbs, the safe SUV in the garage, and 2 amazing kids making childhood memories under a starry sky. From the outside, we were a perfect picture. For 10 years, it had felt perfect on the inside too. We weren't just husband and wife, we were a team. We'd navigated broke college years together, celebrated my first real job together, cried together when our father passed away. We had built this life brick by brick, on a foundation of trust, laughter, and a love I believed was unbreakable. They're beautiful, aren't they? Her voice pulled me from my thoughts. I walked up behind her, wrapping my arms around her waist, inhaling the familiar scent of her lavender shampoo. "They take after their mother," I whispered into her hair. She leaned back against me, but there was a slight stiffness in her shoulders that wasn't there before, a barely perceptible tension. Or maybe I was just imagining it. "I have to make a work call," she said, gently slipping from my embrace. "I won't be long." I watched her walk into the study and close the door. That was odd. She usually took her work calls in the kitchen, pacing while she chopped vegetables for dinner. Lately, everything was more private, more secretive. A small crack had appeared in our perfect facade, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop staring at it. It started with little things I tried to ignore. Late nights she blamed on crunch time at the office. Her phone, which used to be left anywhere, was now always screened down on the table. When I asked about her new password, she brushed it off as a new work security policy. A voice in the back of my head screamed that something was wrong, but I told myself I was just being paranoid. Do men turn insecure in their 40s? Maybe this was just a phase. Later that night, as we lay in bed, the space between us felt inches wider than usual. She was turned away from me, her breathing even in sleep, or feigned sleep. I stared into the dark tick-tock of the clock on the nightstand. Each tick was a reminder of the silence growing between us. I reached out, wanting to touch her shoulder, to pull her close and feel her warmth, reassure me that everything was fine. But I didn't. Instead, I lay there, feeling a chill creep into my heart that had nothing to do with the temperature in the room. It was the emptiness of her side of the bed, even when she was in it. Paranoia is a kind of mold. It starts in a dark corner, unnoticed, and slowly spreads, contaminating everything it touches. For me, it began with the late nights. At first, they were occasional. "Big project at work, honey," she'd say, kissing my cheek as she slipped into bed, smelling of stale coffee and exhaustion. I'd grunt in my sleep, accepting it without question. She'd always been a hard worker, dedicated to her career at a marketing firm. But then once a week became 3 times a week. The dinners I cooked for her grew cold on the stove. I'd feed the kids, read them stories, and tuck them in alone, listening for the sound of her car in the driveway. When she finally came home, she'd be drained, too tired to talk. "Tough day?" I asked one night as she dropped her briefcase on the floor and rubbed her temples. "You have no idea," she sighed, avoiding my eyes. Back-to-back meetings, demanding clients, the usual. But I didn't know. She used to tell me everything about her job, the annoying colleagues, the successful campaigns, the silly office politics. Now, her work was a fortress I wasn't allowed to enter. The phone thing was worse. It was like a third limb, always within her reach. One Saturday morning, I was making coffee and her phone buzzed on the counter. Out of habit, I reached for it, thinking it might be a reminder about Jake's soccer game. "Don't!" Her voice was sharp as a knife. I snatched my hand back as if I'd been burned. She lunged across the kitchen, grabbing the phone and clutching it to her chest. Her face was flushed. "Sorry," I said, stunned by her reaction. "I was just going to see." "It's work," she cut in, her tone softening slightly, but her eyes were still guarded. "New security policy. We're not supposed to let anyone see our screens. It's ridiculous, I know, but them's the rules." The lie was so clumsy it was almost transparent, but I clung to it. I wanted to believe it. It was so much easier to believe it than to face the alternative. The next week, David came over. David, my best friend since college. The best man at my wedding. Lily's godfather. He was the brother I never had. We had a monthly ritual of watching the game and drinking beers in my basement man cave. "How's it going, man?" he asked, plopping down in his usual leather armchair. "Good, good," I said, handing him a beer. "Work's the same. Kids are great." "And Sarah?" he asked it casually, his eyes fixed on the TV screen. "She's good. Just working a lot lately. A lot of stress." I hesitated, then decided to confide in him. "That's what you do with your best friend." "To be honest, she seems a little distant." David nodded, taking a sip of his beer. "High-pressure jobs will do that. She'll pull through. Sarah's a rock." Game yelled at the TV and talked about the good old days. It felt normal. But as David was leaving that night, I saw him and Sarah talking in hushed tones by the front door. They stopped abruptly when I walked into the room. Sarah was smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. David looked guilty? No, that couldn't be right. I dismissed the thought. It was the paranoia, twisting my perception again. They were probably planning a surprise birthday party for me. That had to be it. But the mold kept spreading. The paranoia turned into a cold, hard knot in my stomach the day I saw the credit card bill. I was sitting at the dining room table sorting through our monthly statements, a mundane chore I always handled. Power, water, mortgage, and then there it was. A charge for $250 from a place called the Willow Creek Inn. I frowned. I'd never heard of it. I clicked the link in the online statement. The website loaded, showing pictures of a romantic, secluded restaurant with candlelit tables and a view of a babbling creek. It was advertised as the perfect getaway for couples. A chill went down my spine. We had never been there. I would have remembered a place like this. That evening, I waited until the kids were in bed. Sarah was on the couch, her laptop on her lap, the screen's glow casting dancing shadows on her focused face. "Hey," I began, trying to keep my voice casual. "I was going through the credit card bill and there's a charge for a place called the Willow Creek Inn. Do you know what that's about?" She barely looked up. "Oh, that was a client dinner," she said, her voice a little too breezy. Her fingers kept clicking away on the keyboard. "Last week, I forgot to tell you." "A client dinner? For $250? I asked, an edge creeping into my voice that I couldn't stop. This time she looked up. There was a flash of annoyance in her eyes. "Yes, Mark. It was an important client. The firm is reimbursing me. Is there a problem?" "No, no problem," I lied, backing down. "Just curious." But it was a lie. Her lie. It hung in the air between us, thick and suffocating. She never forgot to tell me about big expenses. We were always transparent about money. It was one of our rules. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her lie replaying in my head. A client dinner. A client dinner. The more I repeated it, the more wrong it sounded. Driven by a feeling I hated, a gnawing suspicion that demanded to be fed, I slipped out of bed, went down to my study, and turned on the computer. My heart hammered against my ribs as I logged into our family phone plan account. I felt like a trespasser, a spy in my own home, but I had to know. I clicked on Sarah's usage log. Line after line of data filled the screen, and then I saw it. Hundreds of text messages and hours of calls over the last 2 months, all to the same number. A number I didn't recognize. My hands were trembling. This wasn't a client. This was something else. I copied the number, opened a new tab, and pasted it into a search engine. I hesitated for a moment, my finger hovering over the enter key. A part of me wanted to close the laptop, go back to bed, and forget all of this. The part that wanted to go back to the blissful ignorance of yesterday. But it was too late. The crack was too wide. I hit enter. The result made the world tilt on its axis. The name that flashed on the screen wasn't a strange. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The air in the study seemed to thicken, to turn to water, and I was drowning. David. It couldn't be. There had to be a rational explanation. Maybe Sarah was helping him plan something. A surprise party for his wife, maybe. Maybe his number was somehow wrongly associated with someone else online. Anything but the truth that was staring me in the face. Denial crashed over me like a tidal wave, powerful and all-consuming. But right behind it came another wave, one of horrifying clarity. The pieces started clicking into place with a sickening finality. David's recent late nights on a project, the way he'd asked about Sarah so casually, their whispered conversation at the front door, the guilty look in his eyes I'd told myself I had imagined. Every memory, every interaction was now tainted by this awful suspicion. The knowing glances I'd mistaken for friendship, the excuses I'd accepted without question. I felt like an idiot, a blind, trusting fool. I sat there, in the silence of the sleeping house, and felt the foundation of my life crumble to dust. 10 years, a 20-year friendship. Could it all have been a lie? Anger began to simmer beneath the shock, molten and fierce. Anger at her for her deceit, anger at him for the unimaginable betrayal. But most of all, anger at myself for being too blind to see it. I needed proof, incontrovertible proof. I couldn't confront them with just a phone number and a restaurant bill. They'd deny it. They'd call me crazy. They'd turn it back on me. And then I remembered. The Find My app. We'd shared our locations with each other years ago for safety, a way to keep track of the kids, to know when the other was on their way home from work. It had once been a symbol of our trust and connection. Now it felt like an instrument of torture. With a sense of dread, I opened the app on my phone. I tapped on Sarah's icon. A map appeared with a small blue dot pulsing over her location. She wasn't at her office. The dot was pinned at an address on the other side of town, an area known for warehouses and light industrial businesses. I zoomed in. The dot was on a small building. I tapped on it. The name of the business appeared on the screen, the letters cold and impersonal. The Starlight Inn. It was a cheap motel, the kind of place you go when you don't want to be seen. The world didn't just tilt, it shattered completely. The drive there was a blur. I don't remember getting out of the house, getting in the car, or starting the engine. My mind was a chaotic whirlwind of betrayed memories. Sarah in her wedding dress, smiling at me at the altar. David standing beside me, clapping me on the back. The three of us laughing together on a camping trip, our faces sticky with roasted marshmallows. David holding Lily for the first time in the hospital, his eyes glistening with tears. "She's perfect, Mark," he'd said. Every cherished memory was now stained, ugly. They were scenes from a movie in which I thought I was the star, only to realize I was the only one in the audience who didn't know the real plot. I drove too fast, the streetlights blurring into streaks of color. I didn't care. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching someone else drive my car, live my nightmare. I pulled into the parking lot of the Starlight Inn. It was even worse than I'd imagined. A flickering neon sign, a few letters burnt out, spelled Sint R Light. The paint was peeling from the walls. The whole place reeked of sadness and secrets. And then I saw it. Parked outside room 12. David's silver BMW. There was no more doubt. No more rational explanations. Just the cold, hard, ugly truth. I cut the engine. The silence in the car was deafening. What was I supposed to do? Storm in there, scream and yell, pound on the door until my knuckles bled? A part of me wanted to do all of those things. The primal, wounded part of me wanted to unleash a hurricane of fury. But another part, the part that was shocked into numbness, just wanted to sit there, to feel nothing at all. I sat in the car for I don't know how long, minutes, an hour. Time had lost all meaning. Finally, I got out. My legs felt like lead as I walked across the gravel parking lot. Each step was an effort. As I got closer to the door of room 12, I could hear them. Laughter. Sarah's laughter. Not the light, airy laugh she reserved for me and the kids, but a deeper, more uninhibited sound, a sound I had never heard before. A sound that had once brought me joy now felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I stood there, outside the peeling green door, and listened to my world fall apart. I didn't knock. I didn't yell. I just stood there, the world dissolving around me. The betrayal was so immense, so total, that it seemed to suck all the sound and feeling out of me, leaving a hollow void. In that moment, I knew my marriage was over. The life I knew was over. The man I used to be was gone, left behind in the parking lot of a seedy motel with my best friend's car. Standing outside that door, a strange calm washed over me. It wasn't peace, but the hollow emptiness after a catastrophe. The storm had passed, and all that was left was the wreckage. I pulled out my phone. My hand was surprisingly steady. I found her name in my contacts. Sarah, my wife. The name was a cruel joke. I hit the call button. I heard it ring inside. A cheerful tune I'd picked for her years ago. It was cut off abruptly. A moment of silence. Then a muffled, "I should get this." Her voice was breathless when she answered. A practiced mix of annoyance and false excitement. "Hey, honey, still stuck at the office? It's a crazy night." The lie. So easy, so natural. How many times had she lied to me like this? Dozens? Hundreds? My own voice came out, cold, hollow, and unrecognizable. It sounded like a stranger's. No, it's not. I'm outside. The silence on the other end was deafening. It stretched on, filled with unspoken panic and dawning horror. I could almost hear her mind racing, trying to process the impossible. A moment later, the door creaked open. Sarah stood there. The midnight blue dress I'd bought her was rumpled. Her hair was a mess. Her makeup was slightly smeared at the corners of her eyes. But it was her expression that would be burned into my mind forever. The color drained from her face, leaving a waxy mask of shock and disbelief. Her eyes were wide with terror, and her mouth was slightly agape in a silent scream. Over her shoulder, I could see David. He was shirtless. His expression was a grotesque mix of fear and shame. He looked like a cornered animal, caught in the headlights of an unavoidable truth. No one screamed. No one spoke. In that silence, our entire world shattered. 10 years of marriage, 20 years of friendship, a life built on promises and shared dreams. All of it turned to ash in that one silent, devastating look. I looked into her eyes, searching for something. Remorse, an explanation, anything. But all I saw was the reflection of a broken man, There was nothing to say. Words would have been meaningless. The betrayal had said it all. I turned around, walked back to my car, and drove away, leaving them standing there in the doorway of their deceit. I didn't look back. The drive home was completely different. There was no frenzy, no denial, just a heavy, hollow emptiness. The radio was off. The city slid past my window like an alien landscape. I didn't belong here anymore. When I walked into the house, the silence was even heavier than in the car. This was our home. The place we'd brought our babies home from the hospital. The place we'd hosted birthday parties and Christmases. Every corner held a memory, and now every memory was poisoned. I walked from room to room, a ghost in my own life. I looked at the framed photos on the mantel. Sarah and me on our wedding day, young and full of hope. The whole family at Disney World, grinning with Mickey Mouse. Me, Sarah, and David at a baseball game, arms around each other. Lies. All of it. Lies. I went upstairs, into our bedroom. Her scent lingered on the pillows. I went to her closet and opened it. Her dresses hung in a row, a timeline of our life together. The dress she wore on our first date, the suit she wore to her big job interview, and there, at the front, the black formal gown she'd worn to David's wedding. The irony was brutal. I didn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears. It was a black hole in my chest, sucking in all emotion. Mechanically, I pulled a suitcase from the top of the wardrobe and started packing. A few pairs of jeans, a couple of t-shirts, my toothbrush. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay here. I couldn't sleep in that bed again. I couldn't breathe the same air she had contaminated with her lies. Hours later, I heard the front door open. Her hesitant footsteps on the hardwood floor. "Mark?" Her voice was trembling. I didn't answer. I kept folding a shirt with detached precision. She appeared in the bedroom doorway. She had changed into sweatpants and a hoodie. Her face was puffy and red from crying. "Mark, please," she sobbed. "Let's just talk." And then the tears and excuses started. A torrent of apologies, explanations, and pleas. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. You have to believe me. I love you. I only love you. But her words were just noise. They were empty sounds bouncing off the shattered silence of the room. I didn't hear them. All I could see was her face in that motel doorway. My best friend standing behind her. All I could hear was her laughter through that door. The trust wasn't just broken, it was annihilated. When she finally stopped, exhausted by her own lies, I zipped my suitcase. The next few weeks were an autopsy. A cold, clinical dissection of a dead marriage. We decided to divorce. There were no fiery fights or dramatic accusations, just an overarching sadness, a resonant emptiness that was louder than any words could ever be. The hardest part was telling the kids. We sat them down in the living room, on the couch where we had once cuddled as a family. How do you explain the implosion of their world in words a 6- and 8-year-old can understand? Mom and Dad have decided it's better if we don't live together anymore. Sarah began, her voice strained. But we both love you so much, I added, my own voice cracking. That will never, ever change. Lily, ever the sensitive one, started to cry silently. Is it my fault? She asked, her big brown eyes filled with a painful confusion. No, sweetie, I said, pulling her into my lap. No, no, no. This has nothing to do with you. This is grown-up stuff. But how could she understand? To them, we were a single entity, Mom and Dad. Now we were tearing ourselves in two, and they were caught in the middle. My focus became my kids. I became their shield, trying to protect them from the shrapnel of our failed marriage. I rented a small apartment a few blocks away. It was sterile and anonymous, but it was mine. I bought them new beds and let them pick out posters for the walls. We established a new routine. Weekends with Dad, weekdays with Mom. I didn't speak to David. He tried to call. He left long, rambling voicemails filled with stuttered apologies and weak excuses. I deleted them without listening. His name in my phone was a constant reminder of the deepest betrayal a man can suffer. One day, I just deleted his contact. It felt like amputating a gangrenous limb. Painful, but necessary for survival. Sarah and I communicated only through texts and emails, short, efficient exchanges about the kids' schedules and divorce paperwork. We met at the lawyers' offices, sitting at opposite ends of a long mahogany table, strangers dividing the assets of a life we'd built together. The house, the cars, the savings accounts. It was impersonal and brutal. One evening, I was tucking Jake into bed at my new apartment. He was clutching his teddy bear and looking up at me with sleepy eyes. "Daddy," he whispered, "I miss when we all lived in..." Time doesn't heal all wounds. Some wounds leave scars. The betrayal by Sarah and David was a scar I would carry forever. But time does offer perspective. Looking back, I've learned that betrayal doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes it's a slow, quiet poison that seeps into the foundation of your life until the whole structure collapses. I had been so busy admiring the perfect picture we'd painted that I failed to notice the canvas was rotting. I learned that a perfect picture doesn't mean a perfect life, and that trust is like glass. Once it's shattered, you can try to glue the pieces back together, but you'll always see the cracks. There's no coming back from that kind of break. My journey forward isn't about hating them. Hate requires too much energy. Energy I needed to rebuild my life and raise my children. Instead, it's about learning to trust my own judgment again. For months, I second-guessed myself. How could I not have seen it? Were the signs there? What did I do wrong? Eventually, I realized that my blindness wasn't a weakness. It was a testament to my love. I didn't see it because I trusted them completely. The fault was not mine, it was theirs. Accepting that was a turning point. I started to build a new life from the rubble, piece by painful piece. I threw myself into my work. I started going to the gym again. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected. I learned to enjoy the silence of my apartment, finding peace in solitude instead of loneliness. My greatest joy was my time with my kids. Free from the tension of a dying marriage, I was more present for them. We went on hikes. We built blanket forts. We talked, really talked. I learned about their fears and their dreams and their silly inside jokes. In becoming the father they needed, I started to find myself again. A year after the divorce was finalized, I was at a park with Lily and Jake. They were playing on the slides, their laughter echoing in the crisp autumn air. I was sitting on a bench, sipping a coffee, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a real sense of peace. The scar is still there. It still aches sometimes, a dull reminder of what I lost. But it no longer defines me. It's just a part of my story. I learned the hardest lesson of my life, but it's a lesson that has made me stronger, wiser, and ultimately freer. I'm building a new future, one based on honesty and resilience, not the illusion of perfection. And that's a lesson and a future no one can ever take from me.